Hello everyone, this is Sean Plott, aka Day9, presenting today a new look at build orders. Naturally, before I begin anything, I must apologize for the extended delay on this podcast. I just had a whole bunch of the end of the year stuff going on with finishing up all my school projects and my finals, and now I have an internship starting up, and I had to do my laundry, and there was this really good taco I ate. But finally, I have some free time. Rather than ask for your forgiveness, though, I figured it would be significantly more kick-ass if I presented on what I feel is the most important component of StarCraft strategy, and that is how you look at build orders and how you think about them in the proper way. I find build orders to be such an important topic of discussion because the way that people discuss them in the forums is actually quite bad, and I would just say flat out wrong in most circumstances. So I'm going to divide this talk into the following 4 sections. First, I want to ask the most basic questions about build orders, and I'm going to answer them in this incorrect way I just mentioned. And I'm going to point out all the flaws in that line of reasoning. In part 2, I'm going to ask those same basic questions again, but I'm going to answer them properly, avoiding the mistakes that I discussed in part 1, and more importantly, highlighting the strength and versatility of the proper line of reasoning. In part 3, I'm going to take a very simple example of the proper thought process in build orders and apply it to a very simple situation. As a result, I can go super duper in-depth into a build order that most people are very familiar with and isn't too tricky. Then in part 4, I'm going to wrap up with a personal example of how I constructed a build order from scratch using this appropriate line of reasoning. And I'll also include how I could have gotten sidetracked or made a whole bunch of mistakes if I thought about it incorrectly. So without further ado, let's begin part 1. The 2 questions that I want to ask that are really the most simple questions that you can ask are the following. What is a build order, and how do we talk about it? The reason I think it's important to ask those 2 different questions is that, surprisingly, most people think the answer to these 2 questions is the same. They will say, okay, the food is your unit count in the top right corner of the screen, and a build order is a list of instructions based on that food. So a build order for a 2-gate opening with Protoss would be 8 pylon, 10-gate, 12-gate, etc. And then when they answer the question, how do you talk about a build, they say, well, you talk about it using that unit count in the top right corner. We always discuss builds in regards to this food number. Obviously, there are good bits of truth in this answer because in a game like StarCraft, when you're trying to figure out the appropriate time to build something, you don't have a clock in the game, so using food or unit count as a notation is very, very convenient and very accurate. Here's the big problem I have with the answers I just gave. If you think about it, this food-based instruction set is extremely detailed. That's a huge level of accuracy and precision in terms of telling you when to build things. And if you have something that's that precise, there had to have been some step beforehand that led to that instruction set. For example, let's take this recent shift to 5-hatch Hydralisk into Mutalisk in Zerg vs. Protoss. A player didn't wake up one day and magically have this perfect build order. He sort of shaped and sculpted a whole bunch of various ideas together and smoothed it down and refined it until he had a very clean, smooth 5-hatch Hydra into Mutalisk build order. That instruction set that we all use nowadays was the final end product of a very long process. Moreover, the concepts, all the ideas, the tests, the failures, the successes of this build are hidden when you just look at this list of instructions based on your food. The final product, this instruction set, is tremendously problematic for players who are on forums discussing, sharing, and learning new build orders. The 2 biggest problems is that players can't deal with variations in gameplay, and they also have no understanding about their builds. So for instance, a player will learn this 5-hatch Hydra build, but what happens if suddenly his opponent gets a whole bunch of gateways early on and pressures him with zealots? That player will feel totally lost because now his instruction set can't be used appropriately. If he tries to make drones here, when he gets attacked, he'll die, so he feels pressured to make Hydralisks, but now he doesn't have enough money to make Mutalisks later, and it's just a big mess. Moreover, their understanding of all the underlying concepts of the build are lost. They might not even want to do this build on a new map, but they just do it anyways, and they have a whole bunch of failures and they just don't know why. Or they'll be doing the build perfectly, making all the units that they need to and getting all the timings right, but they won't be using the units properly. They won't be positioning the units properly. All these little subtle details along the way. With all that in mind, let's move on to part 2. I'm going to ask those same basic questions again, but there's one crucial idea I want to keep in mind. Remember how I said that there was some step before this detailed instruction set? I want to make sure to focus on that step. That is the key to answering any question about build orders. So again, let's ask the question, what is a build order? A build order is an optimization of an idea. That is, it's the best possible way to do something. Now, I do mean idea in as broad a sense as possible. An idea could be something as simple as, hey, if I have +1 upgrade for my zealots for attack, they can kill a zergling in 2 hits. Then we have a lot of builds that now revolve around getting that upgrade very quickly. Or a Terran player might say, wow, zergs really like mutalisks and lurkers against me. Maybe I can try to kill him before he even gets his layer tech going. Now all of a sudden we have bunker rushes and fast tank pushes being motivated from this idea. Your idea could be something tactical, like, wow, this bridge is really narrow. I bet if I controlled this, my opponent would have a real hard time breaking out of his front, which is an idea that's really crucial to destination. That is a great motivator for a huge number of builds. And although it sounds a little vague to say that a build is an optimization of an idea, I want to use that definition because it's very important that I keep referring back to my initial idea and make sure that I'm not contradicting that or violating it in some way. Now it's time for the second question. How do we talk about build orders? I want you to know that this is the most important segment of this entire presentation. All right, get ready. A build order is divided into several key components. These key components are the things that are critical for accomplishing your idea. A build order, therefore, is how you arrange these key components leading up to the execution of your idea. The most important aspect of this notion of build orders is that you can rearrange these key components and you still will end up accomplishing the same big idea you had in mind if you do it right. Way too many StarCraft players think of strategy as this huge branching tree that you open with strategy X, and if you see your opponent doing this, you move down this deviation on the left, and if he does that, you move down this deviation on the right. What a clever player does is he says, I want to go down this middle path. And my responses are not going to be going down these different deviations on the left and right. Rather, I am going to rearrange